Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that can honestly make a huge difference in your software development process, and that is automation frameworks for testing.
Right.
Now, you might be thinking, what's so special about these frameworks? Is it really that big of a deal?
Well, a lot, actually. Think of it this way. An automation framework isn't just about writing code to test your software. It's about having a system, a set of rules and guidelines that helps you create tests that are reliable, reusable, and efficient.
So instead of starting from scratch every time you need to test a new feature,
Exactly.
you've got this pre-built structure that helps you work smarter and faster.
Yeah.
I can already see how this could save a ton of time and headaches.
Exactly. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A well-designed automation framework can improve everything from the consistency of your tests to how easily you can scale your testing efforts as your project grows.
Now, I'm guessing there's not just one type of framework, right? I mean, software projects come in all shapes and sizes.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
There are several types of automation frameworks, each with its own strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
Let's start with the simplest one,
Okay.
the linear framework.
Linear framework sounds pretty straightforward.
It is pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Think of it like writing a simple to-do list for your tests. You execute them one after another in a linear sequence.
Okay.
This works well for small, simple projects, but it can get messy and difficult to manage as complexity increases.
So it's great for getting started.
Yeah.
But maybe not the best choice for a large, complex application with tons of moving parts.
Right. That's where the modular framework comes in.
All right.
With this approach, you break down your tests into smaller, independent modules.
Okay.
It's like building with Legos.
Yeah.
You create these reusable components that you can assemble in different ways to create different tests.
That sounds a lot more organized and scalable. And it probably makes it easier to maintain your tests too, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of efficiency, let's talk about data-driven frameworks.
Okay.
These are a game changer if you're dealing with applications that require a lot of data input and validation.
Data-driven. That sounds intriguing. How do they work?
Instead of writing separate tests for every single data variation, you create one test logic and feed it different data sets.
Okay.
For instance, imagine you're testing a login form.
Right.
You could use a data-driven framework to test various usernames, passwords, and even error scenarios without writing a new test for each one.
Wow. That could save a massive amount of time and effort. I'm already seeing how choosing the right framework can make a huge difference. But this also raises an important question. How do we actually decide which type of framework is the best fit for a particular project?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
There's no magic formula, but there are some key considerations that can guide your decision.
Okay, so let's unveil this decision-making roadmap. What are the crucial factors we need to keep in mind?
First and foremost, you need to have a deep understanding of your project requirements.
Okay.
What are you building? How complex is it? What are the testing priorities?
So if we're building that financial app we mentioned earlier, the one with tons of complex calculations and data interactions, we'd probably lean towards a more robust framework, like a data-driven or modular approach.
Exactly. Now, the next consideration is your team's expertise.
Okay.
What skills and experience do they bring to the table? You don't want to choose a framework that requires advanced programming skills if your team is just starting out with automation.
Right. It's all about finding the right balance between ambition and practicality. We want a framework that challenges us to grow, but doesn't overwhelm us.
Exactly. And as your project grows, you also need to think about scalability. Will you be adding more features, more tests, more team members? Choose a framework that can handle that growth gracefully.
So future-proofing our testing efforts is key. What else should we be thinking about?
Tool integration is another important factor. Does the framework play well with the other tools you use, your continuous integration server, your version control system, your reporting tools? Make sure everything works together smoothly.
It's like assembling a puzzle. You need all the pieces to fit together perfectly.
Right.
And speaking of fitting things together, let's not forget about the budget.
Yeah.
Open source frameworks are free. But they might require more time and effort to set up and customize.
That's a great point. Sometimes the free option ends up costing more in the long run if it takes your team ages to figure out how to use it effectively.
So we need to consider the total cost of ownership, not just the upfront price tag.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on to some specific tools and frameworks, I'm curious, are there any common pitfalls that people often stumble into when choosing or implementing a framework?
Oh, absolutely. There are definitely some traps to watch out for. But let's dive into those after a quick break. Stay tuned.
Sounds good. All right, so we've talked about the different types of frameworks and what to consider when choosing one. But I think a lot of our listeners are probably wondering, what are some actual frameworks and tools I should be looking at in 2024? Any big names out there?
Definitely. The automation landscape is constantly evolving, but there are some clear front runners that are worth exploring.
Okay.
Let's start with Selenium.
Okay.
It's been around for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still incredibly relevant, especially for web application testing.
Selenium. I've definitely heard that name thrown around. No. What's the deal with it?
Well, Selenium is actually a suite of tools that gives you a ton of flexibility in how you approach your automation.
Okay.
It supports multiple programming languages, runs across different browsers, and has a huge community behind it.
So lots of resources and support if you get stuck. Always a good thing.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, is Selenium keeping up with all the latest web development trends? Things move so quickly these days.
That's a fair point. Selenium can be a bit more complex to set up and maintain, especially for modern web applications built with JavaScript frameworks.
Right.
If you're working with those, you might want to check out Cypress.
Cypress, that's another name I've come across. What makes it so special?
Cypress is built specifically for modern web development. It's incredibly fast, has a very intuitive API, and comes with built-in features for things like visual testing and network traffic control.
So for developers who are already comfortable with JavaScript and want a tool that just works, Cypress seems like a great option.
Absolutely. And if cross-browser compatibility is a big concern, Playwright is another tool worth exploring.
Playwright now, that's a new one for me. Tell me more.
Playwright is a relatively newer player, but it's quickly gaining popularity because of its robust cross-browser support.
Okay.
It allows you to write tests once and run them across all major browsers. Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, you name it.
That's a huge time saver.
Oh.
No more writing separate tests for each browser.
Exactly. And it's not just limited to web applications. Playwright can also be used for mobile web testing, which is a big plus.
All right, so we've got Selenium for flexibility, Cypress for modern web apps, and Playwright for cross-browser coverage. What about mobile app testing? Any favorites in that arena?
Appium is the undisputed king when it comes to mobile app testing.
Okay.
It's an open source tool that allows you to write tests that can run on both iOS and Android devices.
So no need to create separate frameworks for each platform. That's a huge win. Now, I know we've talked a lot about choosing the right framework, but let's not forget that it's only part of the equation. What are some best practices for actually implementing a framework successfully?
That's a great point. Picking the right tool is just the beginning.
Right.
To ensure a smooth and successful implementation, there are a few key things to keep in mind.
All right, let's hear those golden nuggets of wisdom.
First, don't be afraid to start small.
Okay.
It's tempting to try to build the most comprehensive, all-encompassing framework from the get-go, but that can quickly lead to complexity and overwhelm.
So start with a smaller, more manageable project to test the waters and get a feel for the framework.
Exactly. And once you have a basic framework in place, involve your team early and often.
Okay.
Get input from developers, testers, even product owners. The more perspectives you gather, the better your framework will meet everyone's needs.
A collaborative approach.
I like
it. What else should we be thinking about?
Don't underestimate the power of reusability. As you build your framework, focus on creating modular, reusable components that can be easily plugged into different tests.
Okay.
This saves you time and effort in the long run and makes your framework much easier to maintain.
It's like having a library of pre-built testing blocks that you can assemble in different ways.
Precisely. And as your project evolves, don't forget about documentation.
Yeah.
Clearly document how your framework is set up, how to use it, and how to troubleshoot common issues. Good documentation can save you a lot of headaches down the road.
Documentation, often overlooked, but absolutely essential. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from understanding the different types of frameworks to choosing the right one, picking the right tools, and even implementing it successfully. But I have a feeling there are still some potential pitfalls lurking out there waiting to trip us up.
You're absolutely right. Even with the best intentions and the most thorough planning, there are some common mistakes that people often make when working with automation frameworks.
Okay, let's shine a light on those pitfalls. What should we be watching out for?
One of the biggest mistakes is over-engineering the framework. It's easy to get carried away with adding bells and whistles and trying to anticipate every possible scenario.
So it's kind of like building a spaceship when all you really need is a bicycle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Start with the core features you absolutely need and only add complexity if and when your project demands it.
So we've talked about not over-engineering things. What other framework faux pas should we try to avoid?
Another common mistake is neglecting to get buy-in from your team. Sometimes a framework is chosen and implemented without truly consulting the developers, testers, and other team members who will be using it day to day.
That seems like a surefire way to create resistance and frustration. It's like designing a workspace without asking the people who actually work there what they need.
Precisely. You want everyone to feel like they're part of the process, that their input is valued.
Right.
This not only leads to a better framework, but also fosters a sense of ownership and accountability within the team.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So collaboration and communication are key. Are there any other pitfalls we should be wary of?
The last one I'll mention is short-sightedness. Picking a framework based solely on your current needs without considering how your project might evolve in the future.
Ah, the classic, we'll cross that bridge when we get there mentality.
Yes.
Which often leads to having to rebuild the bridge later on because you didn't anticipate the traffic.
Exactly. It's crucial to think about scalability from the very beginning. Ask yourself, will this framework still be a good fit if our project doubles in size? What about if we need to integrate with new tools or platforms?
So we need to choose a framework that can grow and adapt with us, not hold us back.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to our main theme. Choosing the right automation framework is all about finding the best fit for your unique needs, your team's expertise, and your long-term vision.
I think that's a great point to end on. So for all you deep divers out there, as you embark on your automation journey, keep in mind that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. It's about understanding the different options, weighing the pros and cons, and making an informed decision that aligns with your specific goals. Would you agree?
I completely agree. And remember, even with all the information in the world, the best way to truly understand a framework is to get hands-on, explore the tools we've discussed, experiment with different approaches, and don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way. That's how we learn and grow.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into automation frameworks. We've covered a lot of ground today, but hopefully you've gained some valuable insights that will help you on your software testing journey. Until next time, happy testing.